Super Mario Bros. Wonder is an absolutely fantastic entry in the 2D Mario series. In my ranking of every single 2D Mario level, Wonder had by far the best average placement of all the 2D Mario games. Still though, I found it hard to call Mario Wonder 100% my favorite 2D Mario game. While pretty much every level was good, the game was missing a lot of elements that I think are important for these titles. Challenge mode was one of my favorite new features in New Super Mario Bros. U, and it just doesn't exist here. Multiplayer was a whole lot weaker than normal since you couldn't murder your friends. But of all the issues Mario Wonder had, the biggest one for me and a lot of other people was the game's lack of bosses. There were only 5 total fights, 4 of them against Bowser Jr. and then a final Bowser fight at the end. This was almost the least amount of fights in the 2D Mario series, which is pretty pathetic seeing how old some of these titles are.
So old, where's your wife? Go home to your family, dude.
Luckily for Super Mario Bros. Wonder though, we now live in the age of DLC. Recently, we got the release of the Mario Wonder Switch 2 edition, and it addressed every single one of the major issues I just listed out. We got a new challenge mode in the form of training, a ton of multiplayer minigames, and of course, the highlight of the update was the reintroduction of the koopalings. This brought the total boss fight count up from 5 to technically 26 if you count each koopalings rematch. Not only was it nice to just have more bosses, but every single one of these are absolutely fantastic. Previously, I've had issues with how the 2D Mario series has handled its bosses, but I think the Switch 2 edition finally fixed those problems and brought some of the best battles we've ever seen in the series. So today, to celebrate how fantastic these fights are, I thought it'd be fun to rank every boss fight in Mario Wonder from the worst to the best. These will be based on 2 main factors. First, how creative is the idea? Obviously, the more unique a battle is, the easier it's gonna stick in your mind. Like, I'm sure nobody remembers what Boom Boom number 12 looks like in Mario 3. Bosses that actually provide a challenge are a lot more fun, so the harder the boss is, the more I generally tend to like them. Also, since the koopaling rematches are similar to their original fights, they'll all be right next to each other in the list, so I can cover them at the same time. I'll make sure to mention what changes do exist for the rematches, but for each one of them, I like their final version the best due to being the hardest. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right in. Now, I did mention that I'd be ranking every boss fight, so we do have to start with the ones from the original game. As I said in the intro, they're a lot less interesting than the koopalings. So, the absolute worst boss fight in Mario Wonder is 26 Bowser. This fight is not cool. I usually love the final Bowser fights in any Mario game. The Mario Odyssey battle is one of my favorite boss fights in the series, the new Super Mario Bros. Wii fight is still my favorite 2D boss fight, and I even enjoy stuff like the Mario 64 battle as well. But I think Bowser's legacy of generally having fantastic final fights kind of worked against Wonder for me. I remember finishing this for the first time and walking away pretty disappointed. For this battle, Bowser is in his floating fortress form, and Mario has to hit the conveniently placed self-destruct button on Bowser's chin. To do this, the floor below Mario will occasionally bounce up in rhythm with the song, so jumping in sync with the music will let Mario deal damage. You'll also need to use the floor to dodge some of Bowser's projectiles, but honestly, this is pretty easy. That's really the whole issue with this fight. It isn't challenging in the slightest. The only part where you could realistically get hit is during the projectile phase, but even then, this part gives you power-ups. Not only is this easy difficulty a pretty big problem for the final boss fight, but this also goes on for so long. You have to hit Bowser so many times, and the only real change to the fight as it goes on is how the ground is split up between different notes. I can at least give credit to this fight for having a unique feel from every other Bowser boss fight, but I honestly never really loved the floating head design. The battle doesn't feel like a grand conclusion, but rather a prolonged whimper. It's not satisfying to finally defeat him, it just feels hollow due to how tedious and unchallenging the battle is. Even if maybe some of the Bowser Jr. fights had less effort than this, I do think I was overall more disappointed with Bowser as a final boss. 25, Bowser Jr. number 1. Being the game's first boss fight, it makes complete sense for him to be low on the list. This is the simplest form of Bowser Jr. we'll see, which is what makes him my least favorite of his 4 fights. He'll always start in his basic form where he'll just jump and slide around. After being hit once though, the fog is coming, the fog is coming, the fog is coming, the fog is coming. This will turn Jr. into his Wonder form, and depending on the fight, some new wacky gimmick will occur. For this first fight, it'll simply cause your sizes to fluctuate. Sometimes he'll be giant and you'll be small, and other times times you'll be giant and he'll be small. Not sure what tactical advantage that last one provides, but you do you, Junior. It is kind of fun playing around with the size changes, and as a first boss fight goes, this is certainly one of the best. What really made it look so bad in the past is just the fact that Junior was the only boss in the base game beside Bowser, but with the koopalings now here, I can at least appreciate this fight a bit more. Oh yeah, I do also like how you have to hit him 4 times instead of the standard 3, which just goes to show how unique all of this game's bosses are gonna be. Well, eventually were. I don't know if I can call this lineup unique. 24, Bowser Jr. number 2. Honestly, it is a pretty close race between this fight and the first, but I think the second one was just barely able to stand out as the better option. Instead of focusing on the character and their sizes, this fight puts the focus on the floor. Not only will it shift up and down, making it a bit harder to follow Junior's shell sliding, but it'll even change elements. The floor begins completely normal before shifting into an ice floor that Mario can slip around on. Then after that, the floor becomes this weird honey substance that slows Mario down. Junior is also affected by these floor changes and can even swim through the honey to appear somewhere else in the arena. Overall, this isn't too hard, but it works fine enough. Also, I didn't know this until looking up footage of the fight on YouTube, but Junior can send his mask after Mario in this fight. 23, Bowser Jr. number 3. Bowser Jr.'s fights continue to just get marginally better, this time focusing on water combat.
I am under the water.
Now normally, I don't really like water levels in 2D Mario games, but Wonder makes them pretty fun with the Dolphin Kick badge. With the new combo badges seen in the Switch 2 edition, you can even equip one that gives you the Dolphin Kick alongside the twirl for the main castle. Even without the Dolphin Kick badge though, since the fight is in such a small arena, I still have a good time here. It gives the battle a different feel from the other Junior fights, though it is still pretty simple at the end of the day. I do like how the water eventually breaks up into bubbles, even if I do think they maybe could have done a bit more with the idea. 22, Bowser Jr. number 4. Wow, who could have seen this placement coming? We've made it to not only our final Bowser Jr. fight, but also our final fight from the main game before DLC. Like I said, the boss situation was pretty rough back then. The boss situation is crazy. This is easily my favorite of the Junior fights. While it starts pretty basic, I love how it gets affected by the Wonder Fog. The entire arena will darken, which not only looks really neat, but it makes it harder to see exactly where Junior is. The platforms will also become those walking platforms that will move based on where the player is standing. The fight gets even better as you deal damage to Junior, as he'll start to clone himself. I also really like that you have to use the color of his mouth to differentiate between the real Junior and the clone. The fight is still not too hard, but it's definitely the most difficult one that Junior got. But now, I think it's finally time we talk about the real reason you all clicked on the video, the koopalings. Each one of them got incredibly well-designed fights that not only put their older fights to shame, but also 99% of the other 2D Mario bosses. These are easily the best fights each of the koopalings have received, and they're all easily some of the best boss fights in the 2D Mario series. They were even each given 3 different variants, an easy version in the story, a buffed up version in challenge mode, and a final version where you have to beat the buffed fight without taking any damage. But the question is, which of the koopaling fights did I end up liking the best? 21 through 19, Lemmy. Again, I want to make it clear that I love each one of these fights, so him being the lowest doesn't mean his fight is bad at all. The idea for these koopaling battles is that each of them get affected by a wonder effect to transform them in some way. For Lemmy here, he becomes a clown jester that's able to drop bombs. I like how a lot of these fights play into and expand on elements that each of the koopalings have had in the past. The bombs are taken right from the Mario U fight, but instead of being easy to avoid obstacles, they're now required to beat the fight. Lemmy will stand on top of a tower of bouncy balls, and you have to knock the bombs into the tower to get him low enough to jump on. This is honestly pretty satisfying to do, especially in the later phases of the fight when his tower gets a lot taller. The way the bombs fly can also sometimes make them a challenge to aim with, as they can fly both over and under Lemmy if you aren't careful. Once you destroy all of his bouncy balls, he becomes vulnerable enough for you to jump on his head. If you want though, you can try to jump on him earlier as a speedrun strat, though it is easy to miss him. Once you manage to hit Lemmy, he'll temporarily transform into a spike ball that bounces around the arena like a DVD screensaver. This phase is pretty scary the first few times you play the fight, but once you understand how it bounces, it is pretty easy to find the right spots to stand in. Overall, this was such a huge improvement over Lemmy's previous fights, and he had some of my favorites of the koopalings before Wonder. This takes full advantage of his bouncy ball gimmick to make an actual battle. The reason he's the lowest of the koopalings though, is just because I feel like his fight is the easiest. The bombs themselves never damaged me a single time, and once you know his bounce patterns, they really aren't too hard to avoid. Even in the rematches, there aren't a ton of changes to make him harder. From what I can tell, he's just a bit more aggressive and the bombs blow up quicker, but I don't really think that caused me any issues. The real challenge is not having the elephant fruit in the final rematch, which makes attacking with the bombs a bit trickier. It's still very fun to jump into them with Small Mario though, so overall, I think this is a great fight. 18 through 16, Wendy. She's the first Koopaling you face in this game, so it makes sense for her to be lower down on the list as a tutorial fight. That said, she is a bit more dangerous than Lemmy in my opinion. Wendy uses the Wonder Effect to turn into a fish. This fits with many of her previous fights being underwater, though this time Mario is able to stay on the surface. Another element of Wendy's design that I'm happy to see implemented were her rings. In previous games, they sort of acted like a DVD screensaver. But I like the reinterpretation here to make them into portals. It sort of reminds me of the Pokemon Hoopa. She'll swim between the rings during the fight, so the goal is to try and jump on her before she goes off screen. She does move pretty fast at times, which can make it hard to line up your jump properly. After a few hits, Wendy will start to summon several purple Cheep Cheep, which will just add some more obstacles to avoid. One thing I like about these enemies is that the entire line dies if you kill the front Cheep Cheep, which encourages the player to try and use the new flower power-up. This whole fight is honestly a pretty good tutorial built around that item, as Wendy often swims above the player. At the halfway point of the fight, Wendy will give up on the rings and just start flopping around the arena. You have to try and wait for her to land on a lower section so you can jump on her head from the semi-solids. While not the most difficult thing, her jump arc can throw you off if you aren't paying attention or try to get too greedy. So I think this fight did end up being a little more deadly than Lemmy, and that's before getting into the rematch version. Here she'll fly through her rings faster and much less predictably. She can go diagonal now! She'll also shoot out more Cheep Cheeps at once, which can definitely catch you in some tight spots. This includes spawning Cheep Cheeps in her final phase as well, which makes it much trickier to track Wendy's movements as you're also trying to avoid the other obstacles at the same time. This fight definitely took me a few more tries than Lemmy's did, so I think that makes it just a little bit better. 15 through 13, Iggy. He's the fifth Koopaling you face, and of the bunch, I think he's definitely got the weirdest design. He becomes a flower with his face on it, and I just think that looks extremely bizarre. Being weird is Iggy's whole thing though, so if anyone was gonna get this design, it makes total sense for it to be him. He's also often found in the jungle world in the new Super Mario Bros. Series, so his reliance on plants feels quite fitting. Throughout the fight, he'll spawn in a lot of piranha creepers, which are nice to see since they haven't appeared outside of 3D World and Mario Maker 2. And Minecraft. You have to jump on their heads in order to land on Iggy, which can be somewhat difficult due to how tall he is as a flower. Playing with his height like this also fits Iggy, seeing as he is the tallest Koopaling. As the fight goes on, the arena will get wider and wider, which makes Mario have to jump on more piranha creepers to reach Iggy. This is made even more difficult due to Iggy shooting out projectiles, which are a mix of the melon piranha plant bullets and the nuts from the skedaddlers. It's fun to avoid both of these, and they do a good job adding an element of danger to the fight. In the later phases, some of the piranha creepers will also have their jaws facing upwards towards Mario, making the floor harder to bounce on. Iggy will get harder to jump on too, since he'll start growing and shrinking, especially if you're trying to jump on him without the flower power. All of this already works as a pretty good fight, but I think the rematch significantly improves it. First off, Iggy will grow throughout the entire fight rather than just waiting for the ending. The piranha creeper arrangements are also much more difficult, especially on the last phase, as several of them will be added to the roof. This makes it so you have to carefully bounce between them, especially with some of the piranha creepers moving together. It basically becomes a Mario ripoff of Flappy Bird. Hey, they ripped him off first, it's okay. Overall, I really enjoyed the platforming aspect of this fight. I think if you're patient, it's not too difficult, but it's still got a great idea at its core. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to bring this up, but every single time I see the piranha creepers, I think of the stupid "Say Psych Right Now" meme. It's been almost 7 years. Get out of my head! 12 through 10, Larry. Before we start this segment, hashtag Larry for Mario Kart. I think it'd be really cool if, as DLC for Mario Kart World, both the original and Wonder designs for the Koopalings were added. I mean, bare minimum, please just add the Koopalings, but I'd love to see these too. Anyway, Larry is usually the most generic of the Koopalings, often not having many special attributes tied to him. Luckily, that did not hold him back for this fight, as he's got a very fun Wonder effect. This is based on the jewel blocks from several of the game's levels, and the goal is to mine through all of the blocks to hit Larry wherever he spawns. It's a reference to how he's in Minecraft or something, I don't know. What I like about this is the fact that where Larry spawns and the jewel block layout is completely random, so it makes the fight feel different every time. There's also a constant element of danger as the blue and pink blocks come closer together, possibly possibly crushing Mario. Reaching Larry requires some quick thinking on what the best route is, which I found to be quite fun. Between hits, Larry will also hide up on the ceiling, requiring Mario to climb up without getting smushed. In the later half of the fight, more elements get thrown in to make the jewel blocks a bit more deadly. Larry will get spikes on the blocks he's encased in, limiting the amount of options Mario has to hit him. He'll also start to spawn in some Bomberman bombs, which will blow up several blocks at a time. All of this is already pretty good in the first fight, but the rematch makes this even better. Not only does he use the spikes on his block more often, but since Mario doesn't have the elephant power-up, it's a lot harder to break through the jewel blocks. It makes the routing here require a bit more thought, and finding the perfect way to sneak around and hit him feels great. The in-between phase will also add in some blocks, though honestly in this case I think it makes this section a bit easier since it lets you hit Larry earlier. Overall though, I love this fight and it felt very challenging. The randomness of the blocks and Larry's spawning position made this battle fun to go back to, and I also just find breaking through the jewel blocks pretty satisfying. 9 through 7, Roy. Roy Koopa's dead! Yeah, he definitely got one of the worst wonder powers from an in-universe perspective because it straight up kills him. Roy himself stays in the background for most of the fight, instead commanding his ghost ship behind him to send out attacks towards Mario. It sort of reminds me of his Mario U fight where he uses bullet bills, but this time his attacks are far more expansive. First off, he'll rain down Fishbones from the sky. This is actually Fishbones' first appearance in the entirety of Mario Wonder, so as a Dry Bones enjoyer, that made me pretty happy to see. Also, if you're curious, this doesn't change Wonder's ranking in the Dry Bones video, but it does make it a lot closer to Mario 3 now. You'll need to hide under the platforms littering the arena, which are another element that sort of reminds me of his Mario U fight. On top of the Fishbones, Roy will also be able to shoot out blue fireballs from the ship as well, which you avoid in the same way. But with Roy being in the background, how are we supposed to damage him? Well, during the fight, Plucky will stop by every so often to drop a light base in front of the player. This is a new item made exclusively for this fight that shoots out light balls into the background. So the goal is to avoid all of Roy's projectiles while shooting him with your own. This is really fun to do, and I think they gave him the perfect amount of health to make it not take too long, but still require a bit of effort. Between hits, Roy will also try to crush a player with his ship, though this phase is really easy as all you have to do is hide under one of the holes. During the final phase of the fight, Boo's wearing Roy's sunglasses will also begin flying around, which I just think is really cute. The normal version of this fight is already quite fun, but the rematches take it to a whole other level. Not only are there fewer platforms to defend yourself with, but he just spews out significantly more attacks. That makes this fight turn into a true bullet hell as you weave between the Fishbones, fire, and Boos while trying to make sure your attacks are still hitting Roy. It feels really good to barely survive the onslaught and rapidly combo Roy with a ton of light balls. When I did this fight, I also liked using the parachute cap badge to glide over the Boos and hit Roy even more. Just a really entertaining fight overall. The only negative I could come up with is that it maybe drags on for a bit longer than I would have liked. Only barely though. I don't think it felt nearly as tedious as something like the game's final Bowser fight. 6 through 4, Morton. He got probably my favorite design of the koopalings, becoming a giant colorful puppet. Oh my gosh, it's like Five Nights at Freddy's! They utilized this idea extremely well. Just like Roy, he'll spend the entire fight in the background. He'll try to slam his fist down to crush Mario, shaking the ground in the process. This is sort of like Morton's ground pound mechanic that he's had in a lot of his other battles, but instead of it stunning Mario, it'll actually bounce him upward. This is actually helpful for Mario as it lets him reach the pull handles at the top of the arena. These handles were used quite a bit throughout Wonder, so it's really cool to also see them be used in a boss fight. They also make a ton of sense here with Puppet Morton, as it sort of acts like pulling his strings to control him. After 3 pulls, Mario can even get Morton to punch himself in the face. Why are you hitting yourself? That was a good one. That'll lead into the in-between phase where Morton will begin ground pounding in the background. This shake will not only bounce up Mario and the blocks he spawned, but also the rolling spike balls, which can make them a bit harder to avoid than it may seem. Now this fight is pretty great in its default form, but the rematches are really what make it shine. Parts of the floor will now be replaced by bricks, which Morton's punch will be able to smash through. That means you have to be a lot more careful where you lead his fist, as you'll likely have to rely on the boxes he brings up from the lava to reach the handlebar. Since he's able to break those as well, you need to lead his fist away from them so they can bounce you up and have you reach the handle. Now that's pretty fun in the first rematch, but Morton's final fight makes it so much harder. The first 2 times you have access to the flower pot, which gives Mario a bit of extra height on his jump. As Small Mario though, you get a much lower jump and have a smaller hitbox, so now it's much more difficult to grab onto those handles. That made the fight so much more intense, but also extremely satisfying if you manage to pull off a quick combo of string pulls. As a tip, I found the crouching high jump badge to be very useful here, as it would let me more easily reach the handles based on the box's position in the arena. The lack of flower pot also makes this fight go on for a bit longer, causing the arena to get even more destroyed. It was so much fun taking on his final version. I think it's a near perfect execution of the puppet boss idea. I love how it built on a new mechanic from Wonder, and of course, Morton having my favorite redesign of the bunch helped this fight a lot. But of course, I couldn't give the #1 spot to anyone else besides my favorite Koopaling. 3-1, Ludwig. He got by far the hardest fight of all the Koopalings, which makes perfect sense seeing as he is the final one you face. Now he takes on a form similar to that of Lack of Thunder from New Super Mario Bros. DS. Instead of just controlling lightning though, Ludwig also has the power to control the wind. This can heavily push Mario either left or right, which does throw off movement a little bit more than you may think, especially during the later phases when there are a lot of things you need to keep track of. When the fight starts, you'll first have to run under him as he's striking down lightning until he spawns in a couple cloud platforms. I always love when a boss fight incorporates platforming into the mix, and this is a great example of that. The platforms are usually spaced out quite well, and I like how they even begin to rain after a bit, which lets Mario swim up them. Upon hitting Ludwig for the first time, he'll then clone himself, which triples the amount of lightning you have to deal with. The cloning ability is also something Ludwig has had in the past during his New Super Mario Bros. U fight, but it's much more deadly here. That's especially the case when you have to try and wait for the cloud platforms to start raining, as the Ludwigs all attempt to strike Mario with lightning. This isn't even as bad as it gets though, as he'll go up to 5 total Ludwigs on the next hit. That makes dodging the lightning in both phases so much harder as the screen gets more and more cramped. But upon hitting Ludwig for the 3rd time, it's not over. This only causes Ludwig to get more mad and begin phase 2 of the fight. The main Ludwig will fly up high into the sky, so Mario has to swim up a rain cloud while the other Ludwigs try to shoot lightning at him. It's pretty fun hiding in between the gaps of the lightning strikes, especially if you decide to go for the tiniest spot like a complete moron. Once you get up to the top, you no longer have to worry about the clones, but that does not mean this is easy. The main Ludwig himself now spews out a ton more lightning, and since he's flying up higher, it's a lot harder to reach his head. The platforms will now slowly spawn in, so you have to stall for enough time until a path opens up for you. This can be extra tricky because the platforms move, oftentimes just out of reach of Mario's jump. That makes this last portion pretty intense, and I like how well the lightning covers the platform in both the strike phases and the rotating phase after he gets hit. After jumping on his head 3 more times though, the fight comes to a close. Already, this default version of the battle is really intense with a ton of lightning to avoid, but this gets even scarier with the rematches. These might just be the hardest 2D Mario bosses. Not that the bar is very high, this is a baby game, but you know, you gotta be like 5 to beat this guy, ooh. The lack of the flower power-up by itself makes the platforming much harder, which is on top of the other changes this rematch received. When pointing with his finger, each Ludwig will now shoot out 2 strands of lightning instead of 1, doubling the amount of obstacles on screen. That obviously makes them much harder to avoid, but also a lot more fun to weave between. The final phase of the fight also has Ludwig spit out more lightning, alongside the wind being added as well. That makes the platforming much more difficult and extremely terrifying, especially since this is quite a long fight, so you really don't want to slip up at the very end. But due to just how intense the no damage battle is, the feeling of getting that final hit on Ludwig is like no other in the 2D Mario series. The fight took me quite a few attempts to beat, which is not the case for most bosses in the series. I loved just about every second of this. The concept is fantastic, the difficulty is pretty challenging, and Ludwig's wonder design is pretty cool too. So I think Ludwig's boss fight easily deserves the crown as the best battle in Super Mario Bros. Wonder. But anyways, that's it for this video. Are you one of those psychos that count the airship buttons as a boss fight and hate me for not including them? Let me know in the comments. I was really impressed by the boss fight portion of this DLC. I thought they would be pretty good, but each fight exceeded my expectations by quite a bit. I do also have a few other videos planned for the other aspects of the DLC, so look forward to reviews on the challenge mode and multiplayer stuff in the future. But before I go, I've got to thank my members being Dick Fama, Wyatt Derpy, Mario Master 101, Drop D Mike 75, Virtual Tomato, Extreme 5026, Madzio2, Adept Tuna, Daniel Castillo 1262, Aaron 0729, Anton 3669, Smuggy, Guy 112, Danny Gaming Central, Young Smoky VP7, Zach Pro, Flame 765, Peanut Brown of Gallery, Corposaurus, BFDI Macaron, Stephen Hafner, Bell Slimes, Night Vision 101, PDX, Wilbur, Jenny, Mogo Mogo Boat, Stuffy Ant, Rich Dude 29, Jehojim, Leonard Von Hevering, Magnuson Larslot, Trifector, Tibby, Hippopotamus, Levi Strux, Nuclear, Cassie Channel, Blast Tiger, Yanni the Duck, Trader Mo, Mevins 2001, Display Changer, B Major 2003, Sir Musty, Belandor, Cinder CC, Jade Avery, Thicky Reiki, Ingenio TM, CW McCain, Tesseract, JubeTube, Jameson Pageson, Z Frost Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.